This isn't your soft launch. This is the hard launch, where we talk about what it takes to build love, businesses, and everything in between. Lilli, it's so great to have you. I'm so excited that we connected, first of all.
Yes.
I feel like there's so many similarities in our stories, and I'm so excited to kind of dig into what you've been building. So, okay, can you share just a little bit about your journey in creating the Prenup podcast and kind of how you got there and like what was the inflection point where you realized like this is what you wanted to go after?
Totally. So I'm Lilli Donahue. I'm the founder of the Prenup Podcast. I never thought I'd be podcasting. I had never been a podcast girly myself until about like a year ago. I was much more into like the short form, listening. I don't know if anybody here remembers Snacks. It was this like Robin Hood thing. Every morning they would do like a 5-minute roundup of everything that was happening in the financial space. And that was like about as much, all content I was consuming. But about a year ago, I got way more into the podcast scene. I left my job at Capital One last fall to start a direct-to-consumer prenup company, and then I needed a prenup for my prenup business. And when the original intent did not work out with the person that I was going to start the company with, I had a few months to kind of take a step back, reflect, and look at this space in a different way. And through lots of dinners, coffees, lunches, I started to realize that you can build the most perfect product out there, but it doesn't mean people are going to come unless they're actually educated on what a prenup is and why you should get one. And there is a myriad of taboos, negative energy, all this bad information out there about prenups that I am trying to peel back and uncover and help people understand that a prenup is wonderful and amazing, and it is actually the most generous thing you can do for your partner. And it is not a setup for divorce. It's actually the greatest way that you can sit down and say, hey, let's start financially planning our future together, and let's get aligned, and let's come together and figure out like what we're going to do together as a couple. And I'm a big believer that is the first large legal conversation that you should have with your partner.
I couldn't agree more. What was like the thing that made you realize that like this is what you want to do and like really commit yourself to building this? Because I feel like this is a topic, to your point, that's like oftentimes so taboo, and people don't want to touch the topic, or like they feel like there has some negative connotation to it. And I love that your like goal is to kind of reframe that and like reposition prenups in general to like something that's actually a positive thing, right? Like it's something that like if you do this, it's a gift to you and it's a gift to your partner, and it actually strengthens in the long run your relationship. So like how did you get to that point in realizing that?
Yeah. So my parents went through a 6-year divorce. They got married, they split up when I was 2, and they didn't finalize their divorce till I was 8. And during that process, my mom went through like 5 or 6 sets of lawyers. We lived in New York at the time, and the only reason that they were able to finalize the divorce is something happened, and my mom was basically able to like kind of use a silver bullet against my dad, who was like the nicest, kindest human in the world. And she is also an incredible, wonderful person, but you become the worst version of yourself in divorce. All your senses of, pragmatism and reality go out the window because you have lawyers in your ears telling you one thing, you have family members in your other ear telling you something else, and then you have media, and it's a very confusing time if you are not aligned. And so my parents' divorce was horrible, not just for me, but it was also horrible for like their friends around them and their colleagues and their parents, and just everyone else kind of got dragged through the mud in it. By the time they finalized their divorce, both of my parents had to file for bankruptcy. We were evicted from our apartment on Park Avenue. My dad had to move back in with his parents in Connecticut at 48 years old. And my mom and I moved in with her boyfriend, who was not a great guy, in New Jersey, because that is where we landed, right? You have no money left and you have no options. So you go where the door is open. I didn't realize how much it had impacted me, really, until years later. My dad got sick a few years ago with lung cancer, and I started spending more time with him, and I was like, okay, when you have a parent who's sick, I don't know if you've ever had a parent who's sick, but you start having these conversations that you may never have had before, like, okay, the fun ones, which is like, tell me about like some of the crazy college stories, high school stories, like fun things. And then you have what would you redo if you could redo anything? And he looked at me and said, get a prenup. And I laughed because I, of course, was like, what are you talking about? He was like, no, I would have gotten a prenup because your mom would have understood that I didn't have as much money as I think she assumed I did. And also like I wouldn't have been so angry at the situation, and every single person should get a prenup. And we kind of started going into it and realizing, like other pieces of this puzzle, right? Which are he's sick, and we looked at his will, and his will was from 2002 when he still lived in Connecticut, with a completely different like set, right? I would have been 12. So it was a very eye-opening time for us together. And then my dad used to be an ad guy, and so he was coming up with all these quips and ideas of, what would we call the company, how would it work, how could you market it, and it was just like a fun thing to do. And then he unfortunately unexpectedly passed away really quickly. So he was diagnosed in March with cancer, and he was doing radiation and chemo, and I thought he was getting better, and so did his doctors. And then the day before my birthday, he dropped dead out of the blue. Just like didn't show up for lunch with my aunt. And we thought his scans were doing better, and I think it was like an aneurysm or a heart attack. I still don't know, because yet again in his will he did not want an autopsy, so I will always wonder what happened. But he passed away, and then 2 weeks later at Capital One I got promoted. So I just like shelved it. I shelved the idea. The person that I was working kind of on it with, was like, yeah, take the space, take the time you need. And then I just put it away. And then last year I went through a pretty traumatic breakup with someone who I lived with. We had a dog, thought we were planning our future together, and things happened. And then I just was like, I have to leave like today. And if I don't leave today, I'm going to be stuck in this for the rest of my life. And I didn't drink for 6 months. I just like kind of pulled back, and I narrowed down on Capital One, and I narrowed down on kind of like finding myself, and refiguring out what I really wanted, what my purpose was. And I kept coming back to this prenup space. And at the time I started watching a bunch of my friends go through their first round of divorces. Like we're in our mid-30s, and hearing that the exact same thing was happening to them that happened to my parents 30 years earlier, I was like, how has this not changed? So I decided, fuck it. Like, I'm going all in on this, because I don't want kids to go through what I went through. And I also don't want my friends to be doing exactly what my parents are doing, like, or did. Like, these are great couples, right? These are awesome human beings who, when they got married, they were in love, they were happy, and they never thought they'd get divorced. But shit happens. Life happens. People change, circumstances change. There's 9 million reasons people get divorced, and we make it so complicated, and it's so hard that instead of being like, hey, you know what, it's not working, let's gracefully part ways, let's align on things, let's co-parent together and like be good people, you just become crazy. And especially if you don't have a prenup. So
It's just such an emotionally charged time, and I feel like emotions just completely dilute any rational thinking or any like practical thinking. And also my parents divorced when I was 1, and so I can relate to that so much, because even if there aren't a lot of assets involved, it still becomes ugly. And I think that one thing that people don't understand is like, you don't have to have so much capital, so many assets. Like, even if you have very little, protect that, because you still don't know. And there are ways that you can like integrate that into a prenup in terms of like future capital, and depending on the states you live in, right? Like there's so much stuff that you need to think through. And I think one misconception is that like, if you don't have anything, then I don't need a prenup, because there's nothing here to like really think about or protect, which is not the case.
it is one of the biggest misconceptions. Like I keep seeing all these, I launched a TikTok, which I'm still laughing at because I'd never had a TikTok before I decided to do this business. And
Same.
what a
Same.
wild- Okay,
It's like
so are
crazy.
you as shook as I am at like
Yes.
just the brazenness of comments and stuff?
Yes. And I'm like, how did I not, like, there is a whole world here that I like never entered that was existing without my knowledge. And like, I suddenly download this app, and I'm like in this world of like comments and video. It's a whole new playing field for me. I'd never had it before I started
Most
Gia.
unhinged,
Yes.
triggering, wild, and like
Same.
talk about when you start talking about prenups and all the chaos behind them. Some of the comments, I am like, okay, are we good? Like, are we well?
Are we okay?
Like, what's happening? But with that being said, like one of the biggest comments I kept getting was like, oh, if you don't have, if you're not like generational wealth, or you're not a millionaire, like this doesn't apply to us. I'm like, actually, it even applies to you more, because if you go to get divorced, you have less money to pay a lawyer to get divorced. And so I know couples that have stayed together because it is too expensive to get divorced and it's too complicated and they don't want to split up households. It is too expensive. So, if anything, it's even more important in a way if you do not have an extreme amount of wealth to be able to go and fight during your divorce. Like my parents, by the end of it, had nothing. There was nothing left
Yeah, it's
because they
exactly
fought
true.
over it.
It's exactly true. And also there's so many things that like inheritance, right? Like maybe you're not thinking about that right now if your parents are alive and well, but like there are ways to integrate that into a prenup and like think about that, how to have those conversations with your partner. And even if it's not something you put in the prenup, it's something that you're forced to at least talk about with your partner. And so you get to a place where like, okay, you've had the conversation, you feel comfortable with both where both of you stand on, whether there's gonna be inheritance in 20 something years or whatever the case is, right? Like you just are forced to have conversations, even if it's not directly going into the prenup. So I think it's so important.
So I am not a lawyer. I trust, I respect lawyers. I have amazing friends that are lawyers. If I was like 5 years younger and like could pull an Elle Woods,
You
I
do it.
totally would. But funny story, actually, I live in Tribeca and I'm right across from the New York Law School. And I was like, "Oh, this is serendipitous," because I had moved down to Tribeca during my breakup and, like, was, like, on my journey to find myself, and I looked up, and I was like, "This is my Elle Woods moment. I should go to law school. Maybe this is it." And I walked in, and they were like, "Have you" like, went to the registrar, they're like, "Oh, have you taken the LSAT?" I was like, "No." I was like, I was like, "Can I sit in on some classes about family law?" And they were just like, "No." Like,
Oh,
they were like, "No, you can't." So, that was a very short-lived moment of, like, oh my gosh, and exuberance, but,
it's never too late. Kim
it's
Kardashian did it. So you know what?
God
Anyone
bless
can do
Kim.
it.
I don't know how that woman does everything that she does. She is, like it's so impressive. She does everything, raising 4 children, dealing with a situational ex-husband, all of the things that she does. It's amazing. Went to law school. So, yeah, I don't actually have an excuse,
Exactly. I'm sure there was a prenup
but
there
it's
too, though,
yeah.
in that situation.
So one of the things is I'm not a lawyer, but I've heard stories, and these are not, this is not legal advice. This is actually from couples because one of the interesting things is when I started to tell people that this is what I'm going to do, they're like, you have to meet so and so, you have to meet so and so, you have to hear about her divorce, his divorce, and all these crazy, crazy things. And people coming out being like, I want to talk to you. And I'm like, tell me everything. Um, I have someone who she didn't get a prenup because her parents were like, "Don't worry, all your stuff's in trust. Like, you don't need a prenup. You're totally fine." Joke is on her because she accessed that trust during her marriage to buy a home with her now ex-husband. And because she had pulled money from that trust, it's all commingled now and it is common property. And so when they went to get divorced, disaster. 4-year divorce. Took them 4 years to get divorced.
I hear, I
And
mean,
her
that,
ex has the
yeah.
house.
It's awful. It's awful. It's awful. And if that woman would have known what she probably knows now, she probably would have done things differently. Like,
And
it's so
it's
scary.
crazy. I have another guy friend who, he was married and, dual income, no kids. They get a big house, mortgage, etc. And then his wife quit her job. Didn't even tell him, quit her job. And then they go to get divorced and like completely screwed by the situation because he's the only one making income and they have this huge house and they had gotten the mortgage on a certain like year and he actually can't go off the mortgage because she can't take the mortgage over because she's currently unemployed by choice. And it's just people don't think these things through. And a prenup's amazing, but I know you and I have talked about it too, which is like postnups are also maybe not as valid in the court of law, but it is still such a good financial exercise as a couple to sit down and be like, what can we actually afford? Especially if one person is going to leave their paying job to become a stay-at-home parent, which is a job in itself. Like one of my favorite books out there is Fair Play, which is all about,
I
how
love fair
women usually
play. Yes.
they always take on, even if you do work, like you're still doing majority of the household work, right? Like it's wild. So you need to have these discussions of like, okay, how are we going to fund a lifestyle? Because if our original lifestyle was both of us making 200,000 a year and then one of us is no longer making that, but we're still living this lifestyle, is it sustainable?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really about having the conversations. Like, And as much as you can put that in a prenup or a post-up, the better. But I think like just having those conversations, like getting aligned so that nobody's surprised if things go south. And I'm curious, like, how is, since you've been in this and,
Yeah.
doing this, like, how has this changed your perspective on like love and marriage and finances? And like, what do you think you're going to take into like your future relationships, or
So
how do you think you're
yeah,
going to approach it?
I think a lot with one of the funniest things has been, so I'm dating again. And what I find really funny is a lot of guys are like, "Oh, so you don't want to get married or have kids because you're doing this, right?" Like, no, I would
No.
love to get married. I think like that is my goal. And I would love to be married till I die. I would like to never get divorced. I would love to be with a partner that I grow with, I learn with, I have great financial conversations with, and I would love to have a beautiful wedding and have friends and lean in, right? Like of course I still want that, but I am much more realistic now about how that looks and how that partnership looks from just an economic standpoint. And it's truly a partnership, right? Like I know you and I have talked about this, is just like in business, marriage is a partnership and everyone has parts to play. And I heard on another podcast recently, this is one of my favorite things that I've heard in a while. Someone said, I think it was on Hot Smart Rich. Maggie's sister said something along the lines of, you know, when you're dating, it's all Friday nights, fun Fridays and Saturdays. And then when you get married, 95% of your life is Wednesdays. It's like ordering in or doing laundry, or it's not the fun, sexy, crazy time that when you're dating and having fun and flirting. It's like it's the mundane shit. And so it's kind of like, okay, how do we align on all of this, right? And the other thing is I realized for the prenup, it's not just about the financial expectations before marriage that you should be talking about. So all the other pieces of the puzzle, like what does infidelity actually look like to us, right? Like how do we communicate our sexual needs and wants and desires? What does family look like? Are we going to go to your family's place for holidays or mine? How do we not have resentment if one of us has to really lean into work for like 2 3 months and the other person is maybe not getting the attention that they need? How do you constantly communicate these things? And I think that like we don't do enough pressure testing before marriage on all these pieces of the puzzle because you're still kind of most likely in that fun phase when you're getting engaged, which is wonderful, but you need to pressure test it all. And then I had a friend recently ask me because they called me 6 weeks before their wedding. They're like, "Hey, I need a prenup." And I was like, why didn't like, damn it. Like this might not work. And like candidly, I think you should get a postnup because I think this is gonna stress you out and you're gonna freak out and you're gonna learn things that you don't want to learn about your partner, maybe. And I don't want to like I think it's just too late. And one of my biggest pieces of advice is if you get engaged, talk about your prenup soon after and do not send out a save the date till you've had the discussion about your prenup and or hired a lawyer. Because I can't tell you how many people I have now talked to in the last year who were not going to get a prenup. They spend a day with me and they're like, "Oh, okay."
Okay, we're gonna
They
do
go
it.
they go and they're like, "Okay, we're gonna go get a prenup." And then
Amazing.
they're just like, "This is either great, I've learned this much about my partner," or like, "Oh shit, I didn't know that my partner had this much student debt. I didn't know my partner had this much credit card debt. I had no idea that my partner was making this much but spending it this way."
But you're doing them a favor. I mean, better to know now than later, right? When kids are involved after a marriage, like the time is pre-wedding, pre-kids, right? Like that is when you want to find those things out.
Yeah, and it's also like, listen, I don't know your friend group, but I have friends that are like spending $250,000 on a wedding. Like they're having wild,
Oh
crazy
yeah.
weddings,
Oh
which
yeah.
are awesome. Trust me, I love being a guest. Are you kidding me? Like a good wedding, a good DJ. I'm the first one on the dance floor and the last one off, embarrassingly. But people are like, "Oh, I'll spend that much on a wedding," but when it comes to spending $5,000 to $10,000 on a prenup, they're like, "Ooh, that's a
Don't
lot of
know if it's
money."
worth it. Yeah.
And I'm like, "Are you okay?
Yeah.
Like, come on."
Yeah. How do you suggest, cuz sometimes like if you bring up the conversation, the partner can become maybe defensive or feel like it's like they could feel like it's sort of like a personal thing that like you don't trust them, or you're like trying to protect something for yourself, or like you have hesitations, right? So like how can people like avoid that? And I guess maybe even if it is something that happens, like maybe that's a flag they need to watch. Like maybe that's a sign that like this is not a
if
good
you
fit.
can't have the hard conversations now, how are you gonna have the hard conversations post
Yeah,
childbirth when you're in a mood and life is throwing things at you and you have a sick parent
exactly.
or something happens to your house and you need like a $25,000 new roof and you don't have the finances for it? Like, you think this is a hard conversation? Life gets harder. It does not get easier.
Yeah. Oh,
I had a really good
yes.
friend of mine recently say to me, marriage isn't hard. Communication and picking the right person is hard. Because there are all these memes out there and stuff that's like, marriage is so hard. It's like, no, marriage actually shouldn't be hard if you have the right person with you.
Yeah.
Communication can be hard though. And life in general is just hard. You're gonna have stuff coming at you from all different directions throughout your life. With kids, without kids, life happens. Parents, jobs lost, whatever it might be. It's how do you respond together as a unit in those instances? And the biggest thing I tell people who are like, oh, my partner, so I wear this hat everywhere and I've given it out to a lot of
I
people and
love it.
people are like, "Oh," and they either love it, they're like, "This is the greatest thing," or everyone looks at me when I'm in it, or they're like, "Thanks, Lily, I'm gonna put this in my bag and never wear it because
Never take it out.
my husband or wife will, like, not let me wear it." I was laughing, I drove to Greenwich today for this family conference, and my friend was in the car, and he was like, I wear your hat everywhere except I couldn't wear it Sunday because I was going to brunch with my girlfriend, and she was like, "Hell no, you are not leaving the house in that hat." And I was like, "What?" She's like,
Red
"I'm gonna get
flag,
co"
red
I
flag.
was I was like, "No, no, no." I was like, "I'm gonna get a coffee with her, and by the time she comes back from that coffee with me, she is gonna be wearing that everywhere, and you're gonna be the one who's like, 'Take that off.'" Like, and so I think it's just a big, like, misalignment, misinformation, and my big thing is a prenup is the most generous thing you can actually do for your partner and with your partner, because statistically speaking, if over 50% of couples in the US are divorced at least once, this is a stat that is floating around the internet, and I don't know if it's true or not because I have gone down the CDC and the census rabbit hole, and I'm trying to verify it. But a lot of people, the stat that has gone around on a lot of other podcasts and research online is that of the 4% of Americans that have prenups, the divorce rate is in the 20s, 20 percentage, so 25, 26%, which is if you get a prenup, it's going to reduce the likelihood of a divorce. Now, causation, correlation, yeah, I get it. But what I am going to assume, based on a lot of couples I've talked to who are happily married with a prenup, is you are setting yourself up for financial success in the future and you are aligning day one on what does it look like, right? Like, if shit hits the fan, what does it look like? And then you also, as you know, with prenups, you have to do a financial disclosure. A lot of people get married and are disillusioned, right? Like, I can't tell you, especially in New York, a lot of people, it's all you have a leased car, you have a rented apartment. Everything is kind of a mirage, right? And then you get into it, you marry someone, you're like, wait, they're in $200,000 in student loan debt from their Harvard MBA. Wait, they're in credit card debt from buying a million dresses for the wedding that I didn't even know that they were gonna buy, or, like, it's now both of our debt, technically speaking. Like, all these different pieces of the puzzle of, like, how does your partner actually spend money, and how are you guys gonna spend it together? It's such an important exercise, and I think I've said this to you before, but if not, like, my other big thing is, if you're married and you did not get a prenup, the next best thing you can do is go get a financial advisor. Sit down with someone and have them, or even before you get married, right? If someone's scared of getting a prenup, say, "Hey, we should sit down with your financial advisor. We should sit down with my financial advisor, and we should talk through why it's important to get a prenup and how do we put our money to the best use
Yes.
going forward."
I think also getting a prenup or having that, like, you're just gut checking that that person is somebody who's not going to get defensive, who's able to communicate with you, who's okay having these types of difficult conversations. Because to your point, life gets harder and the conversations are going to get harder too. And you're going to have to make massive decisions with this person. And if you can't make a decision on this or like even have a conversation on this, then like, what does that mean for all the future conversations and decisions that you guys are going to have to make together? It's
Yeah, and
just,
like they are uncomfortable conversations, right? Like my tagline for my podcast is let's get comfortable with the uncomfortable, because it can be tricky, especially if someone comes from, a family where hopefully their parents have been married forever and they look at a prenup as a negative thing because they've had this loving, wonderful, 50-plus-year marriage. And they look at you and they're like, oh, it's only because you're a child of divorce. And it's like, no, it's not just because I'm a child of divorce. It's because look at our friends around us. There, have you ever met someone who doesn't know someone who's gone through a bad divorce?
No, it doesn't exist. Yeah. I totally agree. I mean, as a child of divorced parents, there is a stigma that like, oh, you want to be more careful because you come from this trauma or from a broken family, and like that's where this is coming from. But is it that, or is it that we've learned the hard way that there needs to be some level of practicality in these moments where emotions can take over, but you need to come back to the ground, like put your feet back on the ground, and let's think about this from like a practical standpoint? Because I think having those experiences and coming from a divorced family just makes you kind of remove the emotions and look at things from like a very practical standpoint. And that is not a negative thing in itself, right? That is actually quite a positive lesson to have learned the hard way, but it is a good thing to be looking at it from a practical standpoint, because emotions can like just, you can lose yourself in that. And that's what happens in a divorce. You lose yourself in the emotions.
And there's so many people, like, because, to your audience is going to be mostly people going through the wedding planning phase, right? Which is like fun and awesome and amazing. And trust me, like the greatest thing I always joke about at weddings is I love wedding cake, because I love the like, I'm the one who goes and takes like 3 more off other people's plates when no one else is, everyone's dancing and I'm the one eating it. So I love a good one. But I will say this, I highly recommend that it's even maybe before engagement conversation. Now that some people don't agree with, but like I bring it up on like my second or
Why
third
not?
date.
Why not?
And
Test the
either people
waters.
run for the hills. It's like, okay, bye. Like,
That's a
or we
good
get into
thing.
it.
You figure it out early.
Yeah, truly.
So how do you think, I'm curious what you think about, like, there's obviously a rise in dual career couples with like dual incomes and, rise of entrepreneurship, right? Like, how do you think that is going to change the like conversation around prenups, the frequency of prenups, if at all?
So I don't know when you are going to be posting this, but so quite literally, I'm laughing because I don't know if you can see this on my phone.
Oh, Plight of the Trophy. I love that. Plight of the Trophy husband.
This article just came out
Amazing.
today,
What perfect
literally
timing.
today, like perfect timing from this. It's on Business Insider, and it's from this amazing writer called Josie Cox. And she just came out with this great book. It's called Women, Money, Power. And I met her at an event that one of my friends who's a financial wealth advisor threw a few weeks ago. And women are making just as much, if not more, than men these days. But what's interesting is this year, or 2024, is the first year in the past, I think it's like 20 some years, that women's income versus men income has started to decline. And a lot of it is contributed to a lot of women going back to the office and or making a selection to not continue to work because they've been asked to go back to the office. So they cannot, because there's no one to stay home to take care of the kids. So during COVID, when everyone was staying home and working remotely, and you didn't need necessarily 24/7 childcare and or support, and you could balance your job and your family and stuff. Now that people are being asked to go back into the office 5 days a week, in many cases, they do not, like, they're making this decision. Okay, do we both go back to work and hire care and help and schooling and all this, or do just one of us stay home, whether it's the man or the woman? But most often it is the woman still. And so it's a really interesting power dynamic shift now, which I am still learning more about. I have a podcast guest soon on the pod who is a sexologist. And one of the things that we kind of joked about, but didn't joke about, it's like, okay, you have to make just as much money, but you can't make too much more. Like, it's this like continuum of a balance to be able to like stay in this equilibrium with your partner. And I had another friend who actually put it, I think, in a really good way. It's called harmony, right? It's like finding your harmony with your partner. Historically, men have usually made more. They have provided. It has been what generations have lived off of. And it's kind of like, I think, a false narrative. And I think it's an unfair narrative. And if that is the case, though, it's even more important for women to get prenups. Like, okay, you're going to go get divorced from an emasculated man in a few years. Like, think how mad he's going to be.
Yes. I think I totally agree with you. I think all of this hopefully will lead to a rise in the conversations about prenups. And I think the work you're doing, and hopefully just the understanding of what women need to do and what men need to do to think through like how their situations will evolve, because we've seen relationships and situations evolve so much in the last 5 years with COVID, to your point, right? Like people I think now understand like you never know what can happen, right? Like we didn't anticipate COVID. We didn't anticipate how it would impact like in dual income households or like even single income households, right? So I think people kind of were hit out of the blue with that, and hopefully that results in like people understanding that anything like that could happen again, and you need to be prepared to take it on.
Totally. And also, it's not just heterosexual couples, right? It's like all couples. It's
Oh
usually what
yeah.
ends up happening is if there is a couple dynamic and one person ends up going back to work and one person stays home, it's like there's such resentment from both sides. It's like, oh, you got to go to the office and have conversations with adults and use the other side of your brain, and I'm stuck at home taking care of the kids. Or, oh, you got to stay at home and take care of the kids, and you got to watch them take their first steps, and you got to watch them do all these fun things that I'm completely missing out on and getting quality time, and they don't want to be held by me as much as they want to be held by you because you're the one who's always there for them. And so I think there's always going to be this like imbalance unless you properly communicate to each other how you're feeling and how to meet each other's needs personally and professionally.
Yeah. I mean, I've gone through it. Like, we've had to have
Yeah,
really
totally.
tough conversations. We had kids during COVID, and, I was working full time in corporate. So was my husband. And I was that woman that was like, now I'm faced with either going back 5 days a week because they mandated that, but I have two babies at home and we don't have childcare set up for 5 days a week. And they were not in daycare at the time. And those mandates came in fast. And like, you have to like either decide to like just grab any childcare you can find without even vetting it, or like not going to the office, which means like there goes your income. So, and like it all happens so fast. And, those conversations are really difficult to have. And to your point, life is not easy. Like this only gets harder. And who knows what's going to come at us in the next 5, 10 years, 30 years, and like what you need to be prepared for.
Totally. And it's also like, parents get sick. Okay. If they get
Yes,
sick, do they move in with you? How do you
exactly.
financially support them? Like it's a very different
Exactly.
world these days. But you need to have these conversations because these are the reason marriages don't last is you do not have these conversations and you do not prepare yourself financially, especially for the future. A lot of it, like one of the biggest things, I love this guy. If you've ever heard of him, his name's James Sexton, and he calls himself the New York divorce lawyer. He's funny as hell, but he's also really smart. And he always says, he's like, cheating is not the reason people get divorced. Cheating is a symptom of the root cause, which is also a million other reasons of resentment. And most often than not, linked to financial issues, right? Of like, oh, we don't have as big enough of a house as I thought we were going to get, or oh, we're not taking as many vacations as I thought we would take, or oh, we're not as successful as I thought we would be. So it's like a variety of that type of stuff.
Yes, that's so true. Okay, I'm curious. You were building a D2C brand. I want to touch on that a little bit before we round out. But what were the biggest lessons coming out of that experience, and how did you decide to like pivot and fully go into the Prenup podcast and all that you're doing now?
I joke that, everything that happened last year for me was a silver lining. It was, it I didn't even realize like I was leaving Capital on a high intensity job and about to go into something, and I hadn't really taken a break, and I hadn't even grieved my father. Like there were a lot of things that I hadn't done, and I hadn't grieved my breakup, and I just everything happened the way it was supposed to. If I had launched how I thought I was going to with the direct to consumer product when like four others in the space were launching at the same time, I would have totally failed. Like there was nothing that was going to make mine separate from others. And then also I was doing it so much out of my own like angst and fear, etc. The last year, the research that I have done, and I've really come to the conclusion of you can build the most perfect product. It does not mean they are going to come. There is a direct to consumer prenup product that was launched in 2019. It's now 2025. And that product just is starting to get press and PR, and they just did a raise and they are leaning fully in. And that product's been around for years. Like, what? So that's one thing. And then the second thing is, I'm a big believer in direct to consumer products are great for some. Direct to consumer prenups can be wonderful. Like, say, if dual income, almost the same level of income, maybe both have a 401k, don't have all these nuances, right? Of like carry, trust, things that you need to ask a lawyer, which are majority of my friends in my community, etc. I do not believe the direct-to-consumer prenups are for the majority of my circle, but I do think that there is a circle and there is a portion of the there is a portion of people and actually some of my friends, there is a market for those direct-to-consumer prenups. If you are very like, you know exactly how you're gonna look at it and your finances aren't complicated. Now, my lawyers last year when I went through my own mini breakup, um, if I had not had a lawyer, candidly a team, really educating me on what I did not know, I would have walked away with such a horrible deal, or I would have just said, I don't know what to do. I have no idea. There are all these like little nuances that I never would have understood if I did not have an educated lawyer helping guide me. So there's kind of this like mid-level. My thing right now is if you want a prenup, go find a great lawyer if you have all these nuances. If you don't have these nuances and you feel like you've pretty much educated yourself, there's some great direct to consumer products out there. I'll give a shout out. Founded this company called Neptune. They're doing a lot of great stuff in the direct to consumer space. Libby started first. They're doing a lot of great stuff in the direct to consumer space. But I do believe, like, at the end of the day, if you have nuances, find a great, wonderful lawyer through a friend, through family members, through research, and have them be your advocate, not just for your prenup, but for your trust, for your wills, for all the type of family law and family planning you're going to need. Because as we talked about earlier, things don't get more simple. They get more complicated as you grow, as your net worth grows, as your family grows, and as, the situations
Yeah.
arise.
And nothing is more worth the investment than this, in my opinion. Like if you're going to invest in other things in your life, like this is the first place to invest in because you're protecting those other investments. And I have friends who had kids and who are married and have not even touched the conversations about trust and wills. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you need to get a trust and will. Like, what is going on? If you literally, something happens tomorrow, you have kids involved now. So when I hear that, I fall through the ground. I cannot. And a lot of it is because they don't want to invest in a lawyer or they don't want to invest the time in looking into
Listen,
it. Like it's
go
just,
find a lawyer.
yeah.
Have them become your person. If you do not have the time or money right now to do it, there is a great company called Trust and Will. They do very quick and easy. I joke like kind of it's a band-aid, right? For like I'm still a big believer, go find a lawyer that is your advocate for everything that can help you with the nuances. But if you currently today are listening to this and you have a child and you do not have a will, go on Trust and Will right now. It's like a couple $100. It is at least a band-aid will to tide you over until you have the time to find the right family lawyer for you and your family. It's just, yeah, and like, listen, it is a really basic will. I've done it because I've tested all these products. I've done it. It's a really basic will, but it is something, and something is better than nothing
Nothing.
in this
Yes.
case, especially if you have a
Absolutely.
child. Like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, last question. What do you
yeah.
suggest people say to approach the conversation? Like, how do they start the conversation? What do you suggest they say? And like, what's the starting point?
Yeah. So if you're already engaged, have it sooner than later, right? Like, do it as soon as you possibly can. If you're not engaged, have it before you get engaged so you know it's going to come around when you get engaged. The way to approach it, I've always said, which is, I joke that I approach it way too early, but here we are. I'm a different stroke, different folk. But for, people who are listening are like, oh my God, my partner would hate that. Reframe it. There's a few things you can do and say, hey, I want to talk to you about this because it's been on my mind for a while. And I want us to be successful in our marriage. And I think one of the things that will set us up for success is sitting down and figuring out our financial future together. As part of that financial future, a prenup is something I really want to discuss with you because if something, God forbid, were to ever happen, I'd want you to be safe and I'd want to be safe. And I'd want us to be able to both be put on a more successful path in case something bad were to happen. Plus, this can help us look at all of our finances for the next few years. And hey, maybe we don't need that crazy wedding that we thought we did. Maybe we actually want to do like an 80-person wedding because we look at our finances and we don't want to be in, a certain type of debt because this is where we're at right now and this is what we're coming into our marriage with. So that's one way. The other way is saying, hey, I've read this book. I've read this article, I've listened to this podcast. I would love for you to listen to it, and then I want to discuss it because I'm a big believer in discussions. Like I joke, but my love language is like sharing music and or sharing books. I'm a big reader. And I love having a discussion after I, listen to the music. And sometimes people hate what I send them. Sometimes people love what I send them. Same with books and articles. And to be able to kind of go deeper on that. And that in a way sets up that person to be able to have an opinion and understand what you want to talk to them about, but it's not like necessarily a direct shot. And so for some people who are avoidance, which is, a lot of people are avoidance, that is actually a really good way to kind of transition into that conversation. It's a little bit of like a gateway in. And then, when people push back, my big thing is you asked, which I kind of asked you earlier. I was like, do you know, like, have you ever heard of a couple with a really easy divorce? And then if they say, yeah. And then you go, have you ever heard of a couple with a really bad divorce? And they say, yeah. Like, okay, so what are we doing here? Like, it is the greatest thing that we could do for each other. And yeah, it might be scary and it might be awkward, but like, listen, babe, if we can have this conversation now, can you imagine how much like better we're going to be down the road when we're having even tougher conversations? Like, this is just the start.
Exactly. No better advice has been spoken. And I hope everybody listens to this who is considering getting married or even is already in a relationship and married. Like, I feel like this is advice that could be applied in any phase of a relationship, whether you're dating, engaged, married, kids, all the things, right?
And when people say they're too expensive to get, like, this is the other thing. Do you realize how much, like, you are going to be getting so much money for your honeymoon? Like, think about it like that. Maybe position some of that money into paying for your prenup. Maybe position some of that money into getting a legal advisor or a financial advisor or whatever it is that you think is going to set you up for a successful future.
Yes, exactly. There is no better investment than investing in that, in your success in the
Yeah.
future. Thank you so much for coming on. Where can everybody find
having
you
me.
and find the podcast? Because
So
I could go on asking you a million other questions, and I know
do
there's so
not
much more that you can give.
my big joke is do not Google the Prenup Podcast because it'll send you to all these other websites because my
Oh,
SEO is garbage, turns out.
okay. Well, tell
But
us where to
I am
find it.
literally www.theprenuppodcast.com. And then on Instagram and TikTok, I am the Prenup Podcast.